If you're a buyer, this is a significant investment you are making. Take your time. Choose your partners well.
Welcome to this week's episode of Change in the Market. I'm your host today, Kevin Chimala, and with us is CEO and President Joanne Gogan. How are we today, Joanne?
Doing well. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for joining us. And also joining us is Chairman Chris Masiello. How are you doing today, Chris?
Morning. Good to be with both of you.
So thanks everybody for joining this conversation. What we want to do today is, of course, give you insights into the market based on the shifts and the trends that are occurring from week to week. But we also want to continue the conversation we had last week for our consumers on how to properly determine the right agent for you to help you achieve your goals. So to kick us off with that first point, I'm going to pass to Chris to give us some insights into the market this week.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's interesting times. We're seeing inventory now coming up, and we've talked about this in the last few episodes. We're about 20 to 30% more inventory today than we were a year ago. As we've talked about, interest rates will, beyond the decline method, you're already starting to see the decline a little bit in the weekly rate posts and things like that. You have this environment now where inventory coming up and rates going down. We will see more buyers coming into the market at a time when we're moving into deploying a national standard as it relates to buyer agents.
Oh, and definitely. And so, with that shift, right? I mean, it's exciting, right? I mean, more inventory is always a good thing. That's something that everyone's looking for. We got a lot of buyers coming back into the market, which is a great news for the inventory increasing. But with that, there's some key points that we want to make sure our consumers, anyone interested in buying a home or selling, right, understands because of the market shifts. How do I choose an agent, right? How do I determine that an agent is the proper fit for me? That's a question that a lot of consumers have. And Joanne, maybe you can give us a little insight as we dive into that part of the conversation to help out our listeners.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. It's interesting because we talked about this last week. There are a number of things that a consumer would want to look to their real estate agent to provide. First and foremost, though, it's that connection. And I think we all know when we connect with someone, communication style, you certainly know that. If you're looking for other ways, you certainly do want to take a look at what kind of client testimonials, reviews does that agent have? What's their experience? And also, what are the certifications and designations that the agent has? There are a number of designations that a buyer may want to look for. The first being the Accredited Buyer's Representative, ABR. That will give a buyer an indication that agent has taken a number of hours, it's 16 hours of continuing education to receive that designation. There's also a PSA designation, Pricing Strategy Advisor. These are the things that you'll see, these little 3 initials after an agent's name, but they mean something. And what they mean are that agent has invested their own time and energy to bettering themselves, increasing their knowledge base so that they can assist their clients in achieving their goals. And that's really important in particularly in this market of continued change, right?
Oh no, definitely. I couldn't agree more. Right? I think oftentimes people go, oh yeah, I mean, I'll just go with any agent, right? I mean, they're all licensed, right? But I think it's important, as you mentioned, out to recognize how to spot some of those differences, right? Outside of the commonalities of communication styles and making sure that you mesh, how to spot potentially an agent who has continued to further their education specific to the market shifts, right? As you mentioned, that ABR certification, which is really key today based on the national requirement that's coming around the corner. And maybe that's a good way to pivot to Chris to kind of help further understand how important that is from a client perspective, that your agent understands the shifts in the market, especially the one coming up with the national requirement, and why those continuing education is important for them and the client.
Yeah, well, education is always important, right? And to just kind of dovetail on what Joe is saying on how to do research, right? Go to the website, right? Go to the agent's website. A lot of them have testimonials there. It's certainly good for the agent to offer some people, most recent clients for the prospective buyer client to speak with, those type of references. And I do think, kind of in our organization, we already do a lot of this. So this kind of isn't that new, right, to us. But for the industry, many parts of the industry, it is. And moving to a national standard, this is one of the first times that the industry has really experienced a national standard. Now, there's 50 states and a few territories, right? So each one of them has their own laws. So, each state will, implement this in a way, right, that's appropriate with their local laws. But generally speaking, though, we are moving into the environment where we're having a buyer representation for buyer to see a property as a requirement. So it's going to have to be a conversation about compensation. And like we talked about last week, and then Joanne, I think, touched upon it, early on in this conversation today, is about, understanding like that connection. What are my wants? What are my needs? Understand the difference between the two of them. Those are really critical, right? Because you got to go through the process of finding the property. And then, once you're through that process, you got to go through the process, navigating the contract, the mortgage, the inspection and all that, So you're in pretty close contact with your agent during this process. So you want to make sure it's somebody you've really bonded with.
I couldn't agree more, right? It's understanding, as you mentioned, not only your own value, but also understanding the value that the agent, your prospective agent, brings. But the last key part that everyone always forgets, I think, is making sure that agent also understands your value, right? And what your goals are. And that those are all aligned, right? It's like a Venn diagram where everyone meets in the middle. And so, I think that's a great insights we brought to our listeners today. Joanne, did you want to close us out with anything to add to this conversation?
I think we've covered it. I think, we will all benefit by taking a little bit of time to just step back and again, focus on if you're a buyer, this is a significant investment you are making. Take your time. Choose your partners well.
And I will not add anything to that, and I will close us out today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please take your time, understand your value and that of your agents, and do your research. We'll see you back next week for another episode of Changing the Market. Thank you for joining us today, Joanne and Chris. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good week. Take care.
Thank you.